a historical chase without Nicolas Cage. Nor a screaming stage gonna watch him all day while he's screaming with rage. Cause we're unlocking the cage.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a very spooky Halloween edition of Unlocking the Cage. We are your hosts. We are off-center. Chris, can you make it? There we go. I'm Meg. This is Chris. We're the hosts of the show Unlocking the Cage. As you can see, we have dressed up for this show because it is Halloween, and our movie was fun, and so we just thought we would pay tribute to it by smearing our faces with fake blood. Well, Chris did that. I didn't do that. So the purpose of this show is to watch and rank every single one of Nicolas Cage's 104 movies and counting. At this point in time, I have seen 15 movies. Chris has seen 28 movies, so we have a ways to go. If you are listening to this as a podcast, we record this live on Sundays at 5 p.m. Pacific time on twitch.tv/managerscomedy. And our theme song is by Will Gianetta, who was our guest last week. Speaking of guests, we have a guest this week, and he is improviser John Serpico. Bring him out, Chris.
Hello, John.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Thank you so much.
I was told before. Oh, thanks for having me. I was told before the show that I should dress up because it's Halloween weekend, and I feel very underdressed compared to the both of you.
To the podcast audience, I am covered in fake blood, a la the end scene of the movie Mandy, and I look whatever. Meg has some fake scars and straightened hair, and John Serpico is wearing a chef's hat.
You know what? I think it's a great combination. I think it's perfect.
I did what I could with what I had in the house.
I have no notes.
I think it's great. It fits.
So,
it fits. I'm not going to say why. I'll tell you later why, but it fits.
I mean, that famous scene where he murders a chef in a stereotypical chef's outfit.
Deleted scene.
The deleted scene. So we always ask this of our guests. John, how many Nicolas Cage movies have you seen?
So if we're getting technical, I've seen 31 Nicolas Cage movies and one Nicolas Coppola movie, because in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, that was before he used Nick Cage as a stage name. So 32 total with a 31 and 1 breakdown.
That's awesome. That's actually a very high number. I think that might be our second most Cage experience guests we've had on so far. I think Brendan Bouzzard had something in the 40s, but he was a films major, so it's an unfair advantage. So it was good. It's always good to have someone who has seen a lot of Nicolas Cage movies, so we can.
What happens is when someone else who's seen more films comes on, they take one of our slots. That's how we got this job. So yes. You have to do the podcast.
I will free up my Sunday nights. I did not know that was part of this, but I am prepared for this responsibility.
You are the host now of the show.
Okay.
The only way to pass it on is to find someone who's seen more Nicolas Cage movies than you. Like, it follows.
I need to get more chef's hats.
All right. So this movie that we're talking about today is Mandy. This is the most recent Nicolas Cage movie that we have discussed on this podcast. This is from 2018, so very recently. It was a movie by Greek-Canadian director Panos Cosmatos. This was his. Do you guys know how many movies he did before this?
I do, because you told me a few minutes ago.
Oh, sorry.
I should have looked that up. My guess is that this is like his third or something.
That's pretty close. This is only his second movie.
Oh wow, okay.
And his first movie was back in 2010, and was like similarly horror fantasy movie. So he definitely has a style, and it is very fun. And this movie was relatively low budget, like $6 million. It didn't do that well box office wise. I think it was like 1.4 million. But I know, I'm surprised too. I think it deserved more. Yeah. But it was super well reviewed and was of Nicolas Cage's recent movies one of the best reviewed ones, because he's had a lot of like video on demand stuff that has been pretty trashy. So this is
I think this is a prime candidate for cult status.
Absolutely.
It's considering how well it was reviewed. and how hard it was for me to see it in the theater, because I actually did see this movie in the theater. The fact that they are so disproportionately like counter correlated means that at some point, like, the secret's going to break and everyone's going to realize how ridiculous and good this movie was.
It's crazy to me that a film that only cost $6 million that has Nick Cage in it did not make at least that money back. Like 1.4 is so low. Like, I can't believe that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think there was much of a wide release. For me to see it, I saw it actually. I think it was released in the fall of 2018. It's like sometime around Halloween. But me and my friend Will had to go up to Salem, Massachusetts, to see it at like a little art housey theater that was in like a mall that looked sort of abandoned. And we were two of 10 people in there, and all 10 people, like, we all looked around and we were like, yeah, everyone in here is our people. This is perfect. But we may have been the only 10 people in the state of Massachusetts to see the darn movie. So
I have a fact from the chat from our friend Brendan. His dad directed Tombstone. So Panos Cosmatos' dad.
I'm gonna guess Dino Cosmatos. Is that
George
Cosmatos?
His friends call him Dino.
I don't know.
He also directed. His dad also directed Rambo: First Blood Part 2.
Whoa! All right. The story.
So it's in the family.
Yep.
So a son of a famous director directs the son of a famous director.
What a small world, this Hollywood world of ours.
Oh my god.
I was curious. I did want to touch on our backgrounds with the movie. So John, you said that you had seen it at great difficulty in Salem. I know. Yeah.
And it made it better, frankly. A movie like this, it almost felt like this was an old VHS tape that someone found, and you watched it in a friend's basement, and it was like 2 a.m. and you were all like chugging Lipton Brisk iced tea out of cans. And, like, it was this very, like, I feel like it took me back to my childhood, like watching Puppet Master or Hellraiser, just because it was, and I don't want to jump ahead, but there's like laughable, weird gore. Like the same kind of stuff that teenagers that grow up in New Jersey would watch. So yeah, it was me, one of my best friends in the world, and 8 strangers all wearing like Danzig and Misfits t-shirts in Salem in the fall. It was like we were all let in on a secret that the rest of the world didn't know yet.
Oh my god, that sounds really fun. I just loved how they employed every filter at their disposal in Adobe Premiere. Every last damn filter you could possibly apply to a piece of, movie was in this movie. And just
their lighting people were really given a lot to do, for sure. There's a lot of very creative lighting.
It's one of those films where you like it looked like it was guerrilla filmmaking. Like, it looked like nothing had permits. They were shooting in the woods. They were shooting in a ravine. They were shooting in what was clearly some dude's kitchen. Like, they were doing these things, and it got me thinking, like, I should have worked on this movie. Like, I should have found a way, because I'm not willing to bet everyone on that movie is like union talent. I could have wandered in and held a boom mic or held a weird filter over a light.
So this something that I learned about this movie today is that it was filmed in Belgium, which was surprising to me. It is a co-production between the U.S. and Belgium.
But there were so many disturbingly blonde people, like way too blonde, and like way too many of them, that I was like, oh yeah, this is not America. Like, this is
But like the start of the movie, like there was just like a little scene with like Nicolas Cage's character as a logger. Yeah. And so he was like logging in the woods, and every other logger was like a gorgeous blonde man. just like filling out their shirts and like walking and carrying bandsaws and yeah.
It was like Nick Cage and the entire Skarsgård family logging.
Yeah, just hanging out. It's like I'm willing to bet they were all like, in some like mountain chateau, like enjoying some peyote together. And they said, you know what we should do? We should get the son of the guy that directed that Rambo sequel to do a psychedelic revenge fantasy thriller. And then it just happened.
Oh my god. Yeah, that movie. Oh my god.
There was an interview with the director where he talked about like what his concept of the movie was when he was working on it. And he was just like, well, I just wanted to go into the woods with Nick Cage and a smoke machine and shoot a movie.
He is listing our broken dreams. My friend Will gave me when I told him I was coming on Unlocking the Cage. He said one fun fact that he learned was that Nick Cage was originally offered the part of Jeremiah Sand, the cult leader, who was played by Linus Roach, who was actually in Law and Order, one of the Law and Orders. So, essentially Nick Cage got the script and they said, hey, we want you to be the cult leader. And he looked at it and he said, no, I'm going to be the lead on this. And the casting director probably said, oh, yeah, all right.
Yeah, another example of Nick Cage being offered a villain role and turning it down.
This is a theme that we have found through watching movies, is that Nick Cage is never the villain, except famously Face Off, where he is the villain for a little while and then becomes the hero. But
it reminds me of apparently like Jason Statham and Dwayne Johnson had like riders in their contract when they're filming the Fast and Furious movies that they're never allowed to lose a fight and they can only take a certain number of punches on camera. I feel like Nick Cage has the same kind of things where it's like, okay, I can be the villain, but only for 14 minutes, and only if I have even more time playing the good guy wearing the villain's face.
That's pretty much it. I mean, I can't find a single example of him being the bad guy ever. So I just love how those writers, like when they have those in a contract, what it seems to always lead to is just like the lead has no character arc because they never have to face enough adversity to like actually, because they never get in a fight and lose. So they're just like the same the whole movie.
Yeah, it's, they can be super strange and not change at all, which sounds like a fun Nick Cage project where he's like, so I'm just going to be this level of weird for 95 minutes. I think there was a movie that came out. This is one of the ones I didn't see. It came out the year before Mandy, called Mom and Dad. And I think technically he's a villain in it. Have you reviewed Mom and Dad?
No,
we haven't yet.
Did Pat Gremion or was that Brendan mention that during the podcast that time?
Somebody has seen it.
It's on
our list.
Yeah. It's supposed to
be
a good
this
one.
is one of the ones I won't spoil it or anything, but this is one of the movies where I'll just read kind of what's on IMDb. A teenage girl and her younger brother must survive a wild 24 hours during which a mass hysteria of unknown origin causes parents to turn violently on their own kids.
Oh my god.
The parents are Nicolas Cage and Selma Blair.
Huh. Selma Blair's in that movie. Oh, wow.
Selma Blair. Yeah, this is a 2017 movie.
Selma Blair.
And so the two of them are a married couple that something happens, something snaps, and the world falls into parent-child chaos.
Well, Brendan thinks that movie's fun.
Yeah, it says it's a wickedly dark, bloody comedy and an over-the-top performance from Nicolas Cage. It actually got relatively good reviews.
But hold up.
Yeah.
We are getting too far afield. We need to talk about Mandy. Mandy is the name of this show.
Thank you,
we
Chris.
Open on a quote from the blackness. Yes. It's something.
Wait, before we do that, I want to do one quick thing, which is just so for anyone listening, what is the overarching premise of this movie? It is a revenge movie where Nicolas Cage lives in the woods and just gets something horrible happens to his wife and then he takes revenge. So that's the overarching plot. We open. Chris, take it.
I will even boil that down to even simpler to say that is a oh god, my brain, Keanu Reeves movie that just came out.
John Wick 3?
Yeah, this
Yeah.
is a Nordic Nick Cage John Wick.
Yeah, John Wick with fantasy overtones and 10% the budget.
Yeah.
John Wick if he's a lumberjack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But what's interesting about this movie, it's a pure revenge movie. He's not fighting to save anybody. He is just fighting to kill. Which is John Wick is like another one like that, which is pure revenge.
Yeah, and that I mean, there's such a that movies of that type have really been proliferating over the last 10 years. There's something very tidy about it, cathartic maybe. People just watching essentially an unkillable revenge machine do what they do. So it's this very much is in that genre of like, spirit of revenge carving path to glory. But this is, of all the revenge flicks of the last 10 years, this is probably the one that has the most ridiculously fantasy overtones.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you say Spirit of Revenge because he was in a movie called Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance. Just saying. Anyway, so we start the thing. There's a quote and stuff, and we're in the woods, and there's a happy little couple.
When I die, put speakers on my head and rock and roll me.
If I may, because I need to rehearse this when I tell the tattoo artist to put it on my back. When I die, bury me deep. Lay 2 speakers at my feet. Put some headphones on my head and rock and roll me when I'm dead.
And Chris, you look this up, and
I closed the window. Yeah, it's a death row inmate's last words. There's a specific person. I wonder who died.
At that moment, my friend Will and I kind of looked at each other and nodded, and we're like, all right, this is how this movie's going to be, huh?
They set that tone. The whole beginning sorry, continue.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the whole beginning is like basically we have like a pretty long sequence that's just sort of setting up what their life is. They're happy. They live in a cabin in the woods that has way too many windows for my comfort level, but maybe that's one of your things. I don't know. And they just, it's this couple that clearly has had a troubled past. Like I think we have hints that Nick Cage was an alcoholic. I think Mandy, it talks about like maybe some abuse in her past. She has this scar, they've found each other and they're happy. They're living in the 80s. They're doing art. They're cutting down trees,
And Mandy, I think to play into what John was saying, is really presented like the fantasy overtones. Like they really kind of give her like some magical qualities as a person, like almost like she's like a forest fairy nymph kind of person. I don't know if anyone else will ever picked up on that. Like she's like strolling through the woods, and I don't know, it just kind of made her theme seem not quite human.
I think between that and kind of the art she makes, she like there is an otherworldly quality to Mandy's character, which I feel like if you get into like the gender theory of movies, it's like, is that Red's male gaze of her? Like, what I mean? But, but the fact of the matter is, like, she's a talented artist that, loves kind of the fantasy genre. She reads fantasy. She paints and sketches fantasy. So, I think about it as, from Harry Potter and Lord of the Rings, like the fantasy genre has proliferated through pop culture. But in my mind, if it's the 80s and you like fantasy, you're kind of an outcast.
Mm-hmm.
So like in my mind, Mandy's an outcast, and then Red is also an outcast for different reasons. And then these two outcasts kind of find each other.
I did not realize
that's how
his
I
name
read
was
it.
Red. The whole time I did not realize his name.
Oh yeah, his name is Red Miller.
Oh
Yep.
man, that's probably the most normal Nick Cage name in any of the movies we've done so far. It's like
he has a lot of crazy character names.
Yeah,
I know like 8 people named Castor Troy though. Like my high school was like half Castor Troys.
What's funny about this movie is like we could kind of fast forward right to the halfway point, like an hour in at this point, because it's like
I was writing the beats for the movie down because I usually write it down just to make sure we don't miss anything, and it's much simpler than a lot of the other ones.
Yeah.
I'm curious. So like this is a pretty long section and of them just being happy. And one of the things that we found in a lot of our other movies is that Nick Cage's romantic subplots are not always very compelling. I think we had one. I mean, we have only seen this is episode 6 at this point. But we had Wild at Heart. I thought was pretty good.
I mean,
in terms of a.
You could technically count parts of Face Off.
I mean, if you want romantic Nick Cage, you got to go all the way back to Moonstruck,
right,
frankly.
which we haven't yet, and I'm looking forward to that. But
it's
I will
so
say,
fun.
I know everyone's very excited for that one. I'm excited for that one. I will say that I think this, so like in comparison to like National Treasure, right, where he has this like tacked on romantic subplot, which is just awful. But this I thought was like pretty compelling. Like I believe them as a couple. I like like appreciated their relationship. I don't know if you guys felt the same way.
Oh no, I liked it. I thought he did great. I didn't think it was gross. Usually Nick Cage, I'm like, he's like way too old for this lady, or like whatever. It just kind of felt like he was just some kind of logger, and he met this like great woman, and he thought, you could see like when whatever his decisions were when he played this, like he kind of looked at her in awe all the time. Like when she's drawing, he's just like I can't believe what you're drawing. Like, you know what I mean? Like he just kind of was always like in a little bit of awe of her, and I thought like that felt like a real on purpose decision, and it felt like, I don't know, it felt like it was playing something. It wasn't just so tacked on and stupid like the other ones,
I guess. The scene that really did it for me in terms of like cementing this as a compelling romantic Nick Cage relationship was the really like super tight 2-shot of the two of them in bed talking about planets.
That was cute. Yeah,
it was super cute, and the little eddies of the conversation was interesting because like Mandy was talking about Jupiter and why she likes Jupiter. And I think it was a lot of insight into her character. This is a storm that's raging on the surface of Jupiter and all that. And she gives this big, long answer. That's like really cool and fun. And then she asks Red, and he pauses for like a quarter of a beat and then says, Saturn, I think. And then Mandy's like, oh yeah, cool. Like, in all of their exchanges, she says more and talks in more kind of an like open, whereas Red's answers are very kind of short and closed. So the vibe I get is he's trying to be the best version of himself for this woman that he found.
Mm-hmm.
Like he found this person, this soulmate that, he presumably, I'm laying a lot of backstory in, but because of the past that it is suggested that they both had, it's, Red saw, Mandy as redemption. Like,
right.
Mandy is the reason why I must be as good as I can be. And she is so much more interesting than he is. So he's trying to be interesting, but he's not interested. You know what I mean? Like Red Miller, before he goes into revenge mode, is, a logger with a dark past that is not the best conversationalist in these woods. So I love that dynamic between the two of them. In the first hour of the movie, that's really the only thing of consequence.
Right.
Is watching this. Yeah.
There's two. Well, there's one thing. So he does say something about he likes the planet. Chris would remember this better than I. The planet that eats other planets.
Oh,
you're on mute, Chris.
Oh, sorry. I'm muted. He says, I like Galactus. And then...
It's Galactus, the planet eater. Yeah.
No, it's crazy. He goes, I like Galactus. And she's like, that's not a planet. It's like, well, it eats planets. And then they pan up and they show a swirling gas in the sky, which was how Galactus was represented in the Fantastic Four movie with Silver Surfer, the second one. So I think this is all MCU, baby.
Yeah, they're tied in at this point.
This is Sony MCU though. This isn't the good MCU. This is
This is the bootleg MCU.
This is the bootleg MCU. So this is actually a Marvel movie.
And this ties into too. We know from other stuff that we haven't dug into it too much in this podcast, but we do know that Nicolas Cage is a huge comic fan. Like he loves comic books, so that make tracks. And I did think so. There's two conversations that they have that I think were important. There's that planet one, and I was thinking like maybe the sort of eating other planets thing. Like I don't know. This is a little bit more of a stretch than my second one, but like is Nick Cage the Galactus who goes in revenge and he eats all the people that have wronged him? And
I
secondly, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go. Secondly, I want to hear the second part.
So the other one, when she tells this, Mandy tells a story about her dad bringing a pillowcase full of starlings. So this is my second time watching this movie, and on rewatch, I was like, oh, pillowcase, okay, and I feel like that was kind of foreshadowing to Mandy being brought out later on in the movie in a bag. I don't know, maybe that was a stretch.
That's actually that actually makes a lot of sense.
So I'm of two minds. I think I think the concept behind low budget film, like whenever I like watch something made with like a shoestring budget like this, is I'm looking for the fact that every scene is going to do multiple things.
Right.
Like every line of dialogue is either putting color into the character or hinting at what's going to happen or setting something up that's going to pay off later. Like, so I want to believe that you're right on that. Like, I want, because it would make the movie, an already great movie, like 2 to 5% better. Like if that whole like really visceral story about killing starlings. As far as the Galactus line, I hope so. well. I think the only reason why it is because I'm not entirely sure that Nick Cage didn't ad-lib that line.
I bet he did. That kind of sounds like him. You know what? To your point, John, there's so much in this movie. Like the reason we can kind of go back and like assume, like I know you're saying, oh, I'm putting a lot of backstory on this, right? Like you can assume so much because their performances are so loaded as if that had all happened in this movie. And like they're definitely performing as if that's all in their minds. And like you said, like the way he treats her is indicative of so much other stuff that it's really rich. Like you can, and maybe that's like you said, like these scenes have to do so much more than just move the story along. They have to like say a lot more, about their history.
Yeah. Let's go to the next section because I think so meanwhile, while they're living their happy lives in the Shadow Mountains, which by the way is a place in the Mojave Desert that as far as I can tell looks nothing like this. I don't know if maybe they're referring to a different Shadow Mountains. It's probably
the 80s was a different time.
Yeah. So then meanwhile, simultaneously, we meet the Children of the New Dawn, which is the cult run by Jeremiah Sand, who we see a little bit of what their life is. Jeremiah Sand is unhappy, and then they see Mandy walking and become obsessed, and Jeremiah Sand becomes obsessed with her, and that's any thoughts on the cult before we move on to their encounter?
So I think with the cult, like the introduction of the cult, they get their own like title card, and so that big creepy red letters, so that does a lot of heavy lifting. But what it is they drive by and they see Mandy walking along like the dirt road through the woods, and then we just get this close-up shot of each of these faces, and they presumably, I mean, these are all actors that have some sort of credits, but they're obviously very they all look interesting and distinct and not like they don't look traditional Hollywood. They look like it was cast well for people that would believably be in a cult. This wasn't like airbrushed Hollywood beauty cult members. This was just people with really interesting faces that told stories in this like, $4,000 white van driving through the woods. And we just get a shot of each of their faces. And I think the last shot is on Jeremiah Sands. And, he's got like the blonde hair and looks like a cult leader. And I think that casting really, really popped, by the way. The actor they had play him was really, I think he did a great job. That like that introductory scene in the van, I think just did so much. it would have been less impactful if there was dialogue, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Like the
Yeah.
first dialogue, I think, is in their house later on.
And he's
We
just laying in bed.
yeah, so we remember that because one of the things that we rank the movie on at the end is the casting. So I think it was I know you'll have a relatively high rank. So yeah, that's a great scene. And then we get to this this part where we have the I don't know what you do, the ocarina of
No, it's it's the
that's
the horn.
motorcyclists.
I know what the name is. It's the horn of Abraxas.
Yep.
He's like,
I'm
do you
gonna
have
be
the
googling
horn of
Abraxas.
Abraxas? And then like every time
there's a lot of people that played a lot of D&D in northern European countries putting this movie together. But yeah, surprisingly, it just really plays. Like that whole we're gonna play a musical instrument and summon demons. Somehow that part of the story works.
Oh yeah.
I have no idea why. People smarter than me have made this movie, and I cannot tell you why it works. But the fact is that this magical ocarina made of like lava rock summons a demonic biker gang. And I'm just like, yep, I'm in. I'm fully invested. This totally makes sense.
I just like how it doesn't it crosses the line like it does, but only to the point like to going full on fantasy, right? It crosses that line, but only to the point where you're still gonna be like, well, this could be through the lens of somebody who's like a little crazy or high on drugs. So it's like it kind of just really does a great job of just really skirting that, just going full blown. Oh, these are demons, but they never really are demons. They're just kind of
and they do have an explanation for it. So they say that they were given a bad batch of LSD in revenge for something, and that just broke their brains such that they're obsessed with violence now.
And so they become these avatars of manic rage. So it's like this cult that is dressed in whites and grays, blow this ocarina to summon the literal manifestation of their basest and darkest instincts, as manifested in the form of an LSD crazed biker gang. I think in that whole situation, I think works because of how low the budget was for this. Like I could see a costume designer looking at like 300 square feet of leather and a bunch of rivets and saying, okay, I think I can make a hell gang out of this.
What's funny is when we get to Ghost Rider, it's like the high budget version of this, and it makes it shitty because it's like, it's basically, they've got a hell gang and they're all pretty boys. They're all like models, and they all represent the different elements. It's really fucking stupid.
And these guys are basically just the Yurakai on ATVs.
Yeah, it's Yurakai on bikes, and it's perfect. It played like I remained invested. That's the amazing thing about this movie is at no point did I say like, all right, under my breath and fidget in my seat and think about what I was going to do when the movie was over. I remained like they had their hooks in me the whole time, which is amazing considering how this damn movie ramps up.
Yeah, it's got we because now we're at the weirdest sequence, which is when they capture Mandy and Red. They leave Red chained up outside for a long time, and meanwhile Mandy gets like wasp venom.
Yeah, like that jar,
giant wasp venom.
Whatever that jar is that the bad guy chugs,
the slime jar,
is like pure pure homemade holistic hallucinogens or based on the wasp venom. But she also gets
stung in the neck by a giant wasp.
I'm wondering if it comes from the wasp somehow, or who knows?
Yeah.
But I don't know.
It was some combination of eye drops of LSD and wasp essence, but both were definitely introduced into her circulatory system.
Like giant wasp too, not like a little one, like the size of a small, like a mouse.
It's like a bald fist, you know, like it's, really, really nightmare inducing wasp sizes.
I would say that was, this is a fairly violent movie, but I would say that was the worst part of it for me, was watching that nasty bug sting her. I did
That
not
was
like
rough.
that.
It was gross. I mean, hats off to the practical effects folks. Like the whole second half of the movie is loaded with practical effects, but this was almost like the first like super interesting practical effects thing they did was like, and here's this like giant creepy wasp, and it's gonna sting you, and you're gonna, it sets the stage for. I think the scene that the guy Linus Roach is his name, I think, or Roche. Like this is the scene where he just demonstrates that he is just just as absolutely despicable as he needs to be to trigger a revenge second
Right.
half. Because essentially he Mandy is now heavily drugged and she's sitting with this cult in like the den of their house, and this messianic cult leader is like, hold on, I want you all to listen to my experimental jazz funk album.
Oh man. Oh, that was so.
And like this is how he is going to like seduce her both physically and like ingratiate her into the cult. Is like, I want you to listen to this EP that I put together.
That's such a great reveal that he's just like a failed musician from the 70s or late 70s. And
Yeah.
it's just so, and that's the part with the really disturbing deep fake where his face is overlaid with Mandy's face.
Yeah, while she's hallucinating, and it's
so creepy. Like that was, to me, was probably the creepiest part of the whole movie. And then he pulls his dick out.
Yep.
Yeah. No, by the way, that Charles Manson, also a failed musician.
Oh.
There's something like that archetype is so great for for villains, and they're going to be men. They're always going to be men because they make such good villains. Is like just that trope of like the failed musician. One's artistic dream is bad, and thus he is emasculated, and then he must build up this new and more evil masculinity by joining starting a cult. Like it simultaneously makes him more threatening, more hateable, and more weak. And that is the holy trinity of creating like a hateful, toxic male villain. And I loved how it was done.
And isn't this kind of like I'm blanking on his name, which is weird. The Scientology guy he started his career as a novelist, right? And then
L. Ron Hubbard.
Thank you. Yeah.
I was gonna say Miscavige, but that's not what you meant.
Yeah. And then so she laughs
at him.
Laughs at him, and
that was a great moment.
Yeah.
But
just over the top cackling at him. He's super embarrassed.
He's like, "Don't fucking look at me," to all his crew. That was a great moment.
And it reflects the true horror of it. Is her laughing at him naked and vulnerable is what immediately leads to her death.
Right.
The most horrible possible death you could think of. And that is obviously an element of pure, real, visceral horror.
It's a very upsetting scene when she dies, for sure. And I feel like that's the turn. And so when I was talking to Chris about this movie, I remember saying like, all right, it's going to be half like very disturbing and like weird drug trip stuff, and then like half of it just is going to be a crazy fun revenge. Like it's that's the part where as soon as we got to the point where she died, I was like, okay. Because Chris was worried about like being super disturbed by this movie. I was like, all right, if you made it this far, you're going to be fine for the rest of the movie.
Well, and the title card comes up at that hour mark after she dies, and it's like, oh, this is where the movie starts. It's like the beginning was like that prologue.
And this is everyone's really long, horrifying homework assignment.
Yeah, and like
now, welcome to class.
But it was an enjoyable first half in the movie. I did not hate it. I did also like the Ash version of of Mandy that blows away with the eyelashes. It looks so like much like her face. I don't know how they did that. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. And which leads immediately to the part that gave Mandy, like the movie Mandy, a little bit of like a viral bump before it came out, which is the Nick Cage in the bathroom scene.
Well, there's a scene before that scene that I think we should all talk about really quickly.
Before the bathroom scene?
I managed to get a clip of and I honestly have not prepared this clip, but I remembered it last minute, and I'm like, oh, we got to look at this because, it is messed up. Oh, where is it?
Is it when he walks into the house?
He walks in the house and there's something playing on the TV.
Yes.
And it is
Thank you for bringing that up.
bizarre
this is
and makes no fucking sense, but it's like the funniest thing I've seen.
So it's a cheddar. It's a commercial for.
Let me just pause it and get the audio to work.
Oh yeah,
the Cheddar Goblin. It was like, what am I looking at right now? Like, I would never want to eat this shit. All right, here we go. It's Cheddar Goblin. Hopefully this works.
Macaroni and cheese. Look, Cheddar Goblin. Cheddar Goblin, did you eat all the macaroni and cheese?
Nothing's better than cheddar.
Cheddar Goblin. Cheddar Goblin! Cheddar Goblin! Cheddar Goblin!
Cheddar Goblin by Devane has 60% more cheese than the next leading brand. Kids and goblins agree. Cheddar Goblin tastes the best. That's why Cheddar Goblin was rated #1 3 years in a row.
Why is there a laugh track to this clip, Chris?
This is from Comic-Con.
It's Goblin good.
They played it at Comic-Con. That was like that's the only version I could find, was one that was played in front of a live audience at Comic-Con.
So this is something we see Red just sort of in his underwear, covered in blood. Just realized his wife has been murdered and is just watching this commercial. It's a great scene.
And he just goes, Cheddar Goblin. That's it.
I think it works for two reasons, at least through my eyes anyway. One is, we see the most disturbing thing in the movie just happens.
Right.
And so, there's this really, super strange, precise moment of levity that I think, for sake of the audience sitting in the theater watching it, was probably good for them in some way. Like, it's almost represents this palate cleansery moment. But also, I think, kind of diegetically, it's a reminder that Mandy is gone. Red Miller is now alone in the woods, a broken and exhausted man, and the only thing in his life are the voices he will hear from like the 2 or 3 channels he gets on his little television. So it heightens his loneliness, his this new road of desperation he's going to be on, as manifested in this really banal children's mac and cheese commercial.
It also made me not want mac and cheese for a while, which I thank this movie for, because I'm trying to diet.
It's
a
weird feeling to not want mac and cheese. It's a relatively foreign concept.
Goblin puke. Ew.
So the guy the Cheddar Goblin, this was a piece of trivia I found that I was going to save for Chris for this. The Cheddar Goblin commercial was directed by the guy who directed Too Many Cooks.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense. Holy crap. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Now, so yeah, we're going to the bathroom scene. Should we watch it first, or should we talk about it?
Let's watch it.
All right.
Yeah.
We have the bathroom
I think this
scene.
is Chris got the scene in its entirety because it's I feel like this is the key scene in this movie, if any.
One of the things about this bathroom scene I noticed is that, and maybe we can talk about it after, is it's like the clearest, most unfiltered footage in the whole movie. It's just a scene in the bathroom. That is a crazy ass scene.
And this
For-
is why you get Nick Cage to be the lead.
Yeah.
Oh my god. I don't know.
And for
Like,
the people listening on the podcast, that was probably very boring, but it's just him in his underwear, chugging vodka, screaming a lot, covered in
It-
blood. What were
and
you
like-
saying?
Yeah, that's the moment where you realize it's like, oh, he's not going to cope with this in a healthy way. Like, this is the moment where you just know that, you know, something in him has now broken. This like tenuous piece he's made with himself has now been torn asunder.
And
You
you
know,
can
like
add-
Mandy, the love of his life, his anchor to reality is now gone. And so he will just descend into his most base instincts.
Yeah, and this is like where a lot of the things you can assume about his past come in, because you're like, oh yeah, something, you know,
Yeah.
she was holding back the dam.
Mm-hmm.
And so he starts plotting revenge. He makes a couple stops before he starts taking on, you know, the people that killed his wife. He goes to visit this guy in a trailer. It seems like they were both in the army, the war together.
Oh, so this, all right. I have a complicated backstory I invented in my own mind about this whole movie, and it's based off of this scene and the previous scene. Basically,
Yes.
I think he was in the Vietnam War with this guy. He came back from the war addicted to maybe drugs and alcohol. And I think he became a mercenary or some kind of criminal upon returning from the war with this other guy. He was an alcoholic. He meets Mandy one night. He swears it all off. He gives this gun to his old war buddy to hold on to. Stops drinking. Crossbow. Stops drinking entirely, because you remember he was on the helicopter, and they're offering him a beer when he's coming back from logging, and he's like, no, none for me. And you don't see him drink until he finds the hidden bottle of alcohol. So I think that's my guess as to his whole backstory based on that scene.
And I think there's enough there that's probably about right. Like that scene with Carruthers, because that's the guy in the trailer, played very, very nicely by famed character actor Bill Duke. You know, they talk about his shared past and their shared past without mentioning it directly. You know, he says, I think the crossbow's called like the Reaper.
Yeah.
And, you know, he literally lifts up like the bed in the trailer and pulls out the Reaper, and Carruthers says, yep. You know, he said something like in perfect condition, just like when you gave it to me or when you left it with me, I think. Yeah. Like every sentence in that scene serves purpose of allowing us to infer that kind of backstory, as Chris mentioned, or moving the plot forward very dramatically. Like, you know, Carruthers gives Red all the information he needs about the biker gang. This is, Meg, what you said before about like, oh yeah, these are the bikers that got hit with the LSD. Carruthers is the one that introduces that. And, you know, like he's also a Fletcher and he made crossbow bolts. It's just this really, you know, it's a 5-minute scene that does just an absolute boatload of work. And it also has another Nicolas Cage get big emotional moment where he's screaming like they burned her alive.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I mean, that scene did a hell of a lot of work. And every scene after that is absolutely bonkers. Because the scene after that is him forging the axe.
Yes.
Can we? Yeah, that is something we were able to get a clip of.
Oh, thank goodness.
Can I just tell you, when this happened, I said, he's forging something? I got so excited. I'm like, this movie just took the greatest turn of all time. Like, I just lost my shit when he started forging an axe. I did not expect that at all.
He is, of course, for those listening, he is wearing sunglasses and pouring liquid metal into an axe-shaped mold.
Hammering it now, that's...
slow motion and at like 15 frames a second.
Just a chromed out axe on one side. It's just like the what's it called? The M scythe from Buffy, except all metal, basically.
It's you know the origin of the axe shape?
No.
It's from a metal band called Celtic Frost. That is their logo.
So my speculation on that axe, when Will and I, my friend Will and I saw this movie live, not when we saw it surrounded by other people back when you could go to the movies, was I speculated that like whoever it was owned the 500 acres of land that they filmed this movie on. He would only agree to let them film there if they put his axe in the movie. And like that's why that freaking axe is in the movie.
I mean,
Because some like dude named Sven made an axe and owns a bunch of forest in Belgium. And he's like, you're going to put the axe in the movie and then you get the forest.
well, like I gotta say, this is not to take. That's not how you can't forge and then hammer something.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? Sorry, you can forge then hammer something, but you can't like mold. You can't. First off, that was aluminum. That wasn't what he was pouring into the mold was aluminum. It wasn't, or like solder. It wasn't like steel. But you can't. Then
it's how you make cooking. It's how you make like cutlery and stuff. Like that's not going. That'll shatter like Pyrex if you hit it against something.
It's gonna be all hollow inside, all voids and shit. But it's still.
I just want to point out this is the first criticism of the movie that any one of the three of us has had. Everything else has been positive so far.
I cannot criticize this movie for its lack of realism. All right.
I feel like Chris and I are both heavily invested enough in the art of blacksmithing that we'd be remiss if we didn't at least point this out.
It's absolutely fair. I think it's more of a comment on how well received this movie was for us.
Also,
Chris, I sent you the logo in Messenger. I don't know if you're able to pull it up on the screen for us.
I can grab that for you guys.
Whoa!
All right, Celtic Frost. Here we go.
But it's a great scene. And then we get while Chris is doing that. All right, so then we start to get the actual revenge plot. And one thing that was interesting was that he went for the black skulls first, when clearly they are the. There we go. So it's the F in the frost there.
Yeah, that would do it.
It's a metal band, and I like it's great. I thought so. What do you guys think about him going for the black skulls first, the devil bikers? Like, it seems like they would be the harder enemy and they would be the big boss. But I guess emotionally, he's got more stake in killing the cultists.
I think that's why.
Yeah.
Because when eventually he gets to the cultists, that's like really the moment of catharsis.
Yeah.
And so what we get between, okay, it's time for revenge, and okay, here's the moment for actual emotional catharsis. Like they're the folks you kill to make an exciting movie.
Yeah.
So it was, and that was the most like wildly shot. That was almost the purest action, because it was like close up fighting in a house, and
there was like he was doing some crazy axe moves too. Like he had some skills with the axe.
Yeah, when he's fighting the real big, like just behemoth looking dude in the leather in front of the burning car.
Oh, that's a great one.
Yeah. And so that's the kind of thing you put on that's the kind of thing you put on the 3-minute reel you send to the Cannes Film Festival. It was shot with quick cuts because obviously like Nick Cage probably didn't spend like 6 months training like Keanu Reeves for like long action shots or anything. But it was still pretty well shot. It was really wild. And actually, the added benefit of fighting the biker gang first is it allows him access to a Scarface amount of cocaine and a pinky's worth of high-powered LSD,
which makes him fucking his face melt,
and a cool vest.
And he gets a pretty cool vest out of it too.
I also think it's a good strategy move because now.
He doesn't have to worry about them.
Yeah, they're not gonna. The guy can't call them for help at some point or something like that.
He kills the pawns first. The pawns are off the board.
Yeah. And also, we didn't talk. Well, I don't know how
I know what you want to talk about, Chris.
Knife Dick.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah.
What was that?
Knife Dick.
I missed that the first time I watched the movie. Still don't understand what that.
I mean, they showed a guy dead, bent over, with blood all over his butt. I'm like, I guess this is that guy's MO. It's the Knife Dick people, which is wow.
I mean, it makes him real evil.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I don't think I picked that up when I watched it the first time, but this time I'm like, okay, I'm pretty sure there is like a knife dick situation happening. I don't want to watch it a third time to confirm this.
Yeah.
I think 2 watches of this over a 3-year period is plenty. But at some point in the future, like I'm gonna put a post-it note up on my desk that just says knife dick.
2024.
Knife dick.
And yeah, and a few
Your wife's
years
gonna
from
be like,
now,
"Knife
I'm
dick."
gonna confirm it.
Is that your password, knife dick, honey?
It's like, no, do not Google knife dick. Do not enter this password. This is just a me project for my mid-40s.
Don't look for knife dick.
Yeah,
And here's the
You'll find
question though,
you.
because I feel like we never really, is that his dick or is that something on his costume? You know, because I think that's really where we get to the like, are these humans, you know, or are they humans in crazy costumes, or are they something else?
Also, for such an overweight man, really good blood flow, keeping it up, just great control.
Well, if it's a
Mhm.
costume, it's not you know.
Yeah, that's true. It could just be an attachment on the front of his pants. I have no
So
clue.
I think, you know, all credit due to the costume designer,
Oh my
because
god, they're so good.
like they were otherworldly enough, but also made of stuff you can get at Home Depot. And so the fact that we walk this line puts us into this delightful what if territory that we're in right now. They very well could be humans under there that took a bunch of bad drugs and said, you know what, we are gonna get some leather, and we are gonna get some nuts and bolts and a knife and a cod piece, and we're just gonna sort our whole aesthetic out. Or it could be like, you know, or it could be a man absolutely despondent with grief, um, you know, projecting his monsters onto bikers wearing normal biker stuff. Or he could have descended into a fantasy land, or he could have died when they put barbed wire in his mouth when they killed Mandy originally. Like, all of these things are on the table, I think,
Yeah.
which is kind of cool. And all of that is because of the costuming, I would say.
Yeah. Yeah, like it could be that part of the backstory we don't know is untreated schizophrenia.
Absolutely. It's
I think everything's there.
So he kills these
Then-
guys. He gets in a crazy axe fight with that guy.
then he goes after the cultists, and that's when it's interesting because like they don't really put up that much of a fight.
Well,
What's
before
up?
the
Yeah.
cultist, there's that huge Tiger King reference where he walks
Oh
into
my gosh.
the lab.
Yeah, you're right.
He walks into the lab with a tiger shirt on, and there's a tiger in a cage. It's like, oh my god, it's like they knew he was gonna play the Tiger King one day.
Yeah, that was him. That was him calling his shot like Babe Ruth.
He's like, the talks were already underway. He's like, hey, put a tiger in the scene just to kind of foreshadow my career.
Yeah, I feel like that scene with that super weird scene with the chemist, not necessary at all.
True.
He could have literally found a post-it note that said, you know,
They're north.
yeah, they're north, or as a reminder, cash check from Jeremiah Sands, who lives in the church in the ravine. Like, but we had this weird moment with, you know, another really interesting, you know, character actor, Richard Brake, who plays the chemist. And it's just this weird moment of like strange, like dialogue between a man covered in blood and a chemist with a big cat in a cage.
Here's a little trivia thing about that. In early drafts of the script, the Lizzie was a lizard, and then the actor said that when he arrived on the set, the director said, "Oh, by the way, Lizzie's a tiger now."
Hey,
That's what happens when you're just a working character actor. You know, you sign a contract expecting a lizard, they give you a tiger, you say, you know what, I want my $50,000.
What was that other trivia? You told me something else about.
Oh
the
yeah,
actor.
so Richard Brake was one of the actors who played the Night King in Game of Thrones. Not near the end when he was more prominent, but some of the earlier stuff with him.
What's interesting about that scene? Oh, sorry.
He's got he's one of those actors with like super interesting, unique like facial features and bone structure. Like whenever you see someone that, you know, that plays a lot of roles under like prostheses and makeup, and you look at their face, they're like, oh yeah, they got a cool looking face. And Richard Brake is one of those cool looking face character actors.
Yes. And I think that was probably maybe the weakest scene in the movie for me, but it still was
If you
interesting.
think about
And
it, like Lord of the
What?
Rings, like if you think about Lord of the Rings, that was like he just killed the Uruk-hai and he went to go talk to Saruman, you know?
no,
All
but
right,
Saruman's
I got-
evil.
I got nothing. Never mind. Continue.
Meg, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
I think it was the only scene that was wholly unnecessary.
Yeah.
I think it was weird for sake of weird. It also told a really interesting color story, though. Like it was
Mhm.
all, white and clean and light gray and like lit kind of, like late evening. So, I think from a cinematography perspective, it was interesting, but that's not a reason to put a 5-minute Richard Brake plus Tiger scene in a movie.
Yeah.
And I mean, again, the fact that we're complaining about something which was interesting, it certainly
Yeah.
was memorable, shows that we did really like this movie. And I thought it was nice too. I think this was one of the scene where, you think that he's going to be against Red because he's working for the cultists, but he just looks at him, he's like, I think this is the one where he's like, they took so much from you, and so he's like, I will help you,
He doesn't
So-
actually say anything. Nick Cage has no lines in that scene. It's all him psychically knowing what he wants to say. I'm serious.
Yeah.
Nick Cage has no lines.
Yeah, I think so.
He's just like, you're right. I should let the tiger go, and he lets him go. But Nick Cage never said anything, and then he's like, the family north. Anyway, we should probably move on to when he starts slaughtering.
Yeah, so
cultists.
we get to the cultists, and we get to the scene that I remembered most from my first what stood out to me the first watching, which is the chainsaw versus really big chainsaw, which I wish we had a clip of, but
Yeah.
I don't think we do.
Chainsaw v chainsaw fight. Holy shit.
It's
I
after
long chainsaw.
when you see, a blood-soaked Nick Cage fighting a giant leather man with a heavy metal axe. You think, well, this is going to be the melee fight scene of the movie. And then 20 minutes later, you have a chainsaw measuring contest in the middle of the woods. And that's the last big fight, and it feels like the last big fight, even though it's between Red and a character that has no lines in the movie, or one line in a movie. He's literally just a guy in a tank top with a 6-foot-long chainsaw. And that's enough. That fight scene's the personification of like, this is the last physical hurdle. Everything past this is going to be, this descent into emotional catharsis. But before we get there, chainsaw fight.
That man is literally like a stunt man from Belgium. That's like, that he's hired, and then like that's his scene.
He probably brought his own chainsaw.
Yeah,
Ready to go.
That chainsaw, I didn't even know they made him that big. I wonder if it was custom just for this movie. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe that guy with the 500 acres of forest was like, you are using my axe, that is good. But I have a chainsaw in the barn if you would like the chainsaw. And they were like, all right, you can put the chainsaw in.
They look in the thing, they're like, oh, we got to add a chainsaw fight.
Yeah, let's send this script back, have them punch it up in the boardroom, and then we'll shoot the chainsaw.
It's like, no, you don't understand. This thing is 6 feet long. It's taller than me. Chainsaw fight.
It must be very hard for them to have wielded that, it's heavy.
Yeah.
Heavy, weirdly weighted.
It's like a
Yeah.
2-man.
Seems like it'd be hard to fight with, but
I mean, what's kind of cool is, the fact that Red's a logger, and the first time we see him, he's using a chainsaw, and the last fight of the movie, he's using a chainsaw.
Back to his
is
roots.
kind of cool. We see the two sides of him, a man with a violent past that has made enough peace that he can, clear cut old growth trees, and then at the very end, he fully descends into madness and revenge, and he uses that same tool again for these far darker purposes.
yeah.
Also, like one of the most direct links to Ghost Rider is at this exact moment when he wields a chain to kill the guy, just like Ghost Rider when he flings it at the guy, pulls him in. It was like, man, you could cut that scene right into one of the Ghost Rider movies.
And Chris will absolutely be doing that.
And I will be doing that. Yes, I will be doing that. When we make the ultimate supercut movie of all the movies combined, that is going to be there.
So he fights a couple people. He well, not really fights, he just kills them. The sort of the like number 2 dude, he killed him with the spiky end of the axe in a fairly gruesome mouth stabbing scene. And then he lets the younger girl who's part of the cult go, which is, you know, a nice touch.
Yeah.
Not just murdering everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And he beheads the older woman, who I think at this point we've established, like, she was, you know, clearly the one of the people who was torturing Mandy. So I think we're sort of set up to be like, okay, she's part of the evil thing, whereas the younger woman is sort of treated as like a captive, I would say, as sort of with the Russian roulette scene. Like, it's clear that like she's being victimized.
Yeah.
And then I forgot one thing about the chainsaw thing scene, which I didn't remember for the last time, is he sets the guy on fire. And maybe this is the other one where he sets the guy on fire. He beheads the guy, sets him on fire, and then lights his cigarette with his flaming head.
That was the guy by the car. That was the guy.
That was the guy by that was the big leather dude by the car. Yeah.
We can't forget to note that, because that's important.
And we get that nice, like, tight close up of his face, you know, wide-eyed, cigarette smoke. It's
like, oh my god!
It's those moments, those precise little moments, where a satisfied audience says, "Thank you, Nick Cage.
Yeah.
You and only you could sell that."
And this movie had a lot of dilated contact lenses.
Oh yeah.
Like,
yeah.
the Nick Cage crazy eyes, but with dilated. Now it's like, holy shit, next level.
Like, of the $6 million budget, like $3 million went to Nick Cage. Everybody else got paid scale, and then like $2.9 million into dilated contact.
Yeah, it's just like nothing.
They went
contact.
through so many. We finally end his revenge, and he confronts Jeremiah Sand. He squishes his head in a particularly gross scene. Any thoughts on that final revenge scene in the chapel?
It was very unsettling because of the throbbing, like the way the camera went in and out constantly. That was very weird for me.
Yeah, it was like fading in and out, and so. Yeah. You know, I like that. It's all director of photography doing cool stuff, and the director's like, yeah, just be weird here. I think the kind of head exploding scene, or the head crush scene.
Yeah.
It did a couple of things. One, it was super gross, and I didn't expect it. That's the thing. Practical effects like that and maybe because I was born in the 80s and I'm a child of like Hellraiser and Puppet Master and movies where it's just like buckets and buckets of blood and guts. But like practical effects always hit me harder than anything computer generated when it comes to like gore and horror. And so, like seeing kind of that the head get crushed was very gross. And also, like, that's not a thing a human can do. So that, for me, that kind of symbolized this last moment where he has now just become a revenant. He is cast off his human form. He is now just revenge that walks the earth. Like, because human beings can't, especially like 52-year-old human beings, can't just like crush a skull. Like, pecs don't work that way. But he is no longer human. That, for me, that's what that little scene represented. And then that was it. Like, his journey is now over. He has done this thing. So, yeah.
And I think we talked a little bit about the photography for it, but I think one thing we haven't brought up at all is the soundtrack for this.
Yeah.
The score was written by a guy named Johan Johansson, who actually died right before Mandy came out. So this movie is dedicated to him. He also did the soundtrack for Arrival, and a few other things. But I just think the music in this is just incredible. Like the soundtrack is very much the sort of synth and 80s. It feels like similar to like Thor Ragnarok to me if it was, incredibly dark.
Yeah.
It kind of yeah.
I heard somewhere, I forget who, it was like a director, like I was like watching some interview with like a director that was talking about advice that some other director gave him or her, but it was about making kind of a period piece or making something that's anchored in a specific year. Is you shouldn't kind of bash the audience over the head with the year. Like it shouldn't like there shouldn't have been like a reelect Ronald Reagan poster like hanging in the middle of the woods or something like that. Like it needs to be a little more subtle. And I think between like the weird goblin mac and cheese commercial on like the big tube television plus the music, like set it into the 80s in like this perfect kind of way without it being too overt. So I thought the music did a ton of heavy lifting, and I totally agree with you. It was totally awesome.
Yeah.
So what's sorry.
No, I was just going to take us to our very final scene, but Chris, did you have something before we go there?
Oh, no. Oh yeah, we have it in the media. We can play it.
The media.
Oh, not the forging scene. We saw the forging scene.
I mean, we could watch it again.
This is the very last scene in the film, which I'm dressed as.
So he's driving away after killing the cultists.
That's the smile. That's if I could do it all over again, that would be my business card.
Jeez Louise.
Yeah. So I guess my question. So I have a kind of a pretty clear interpretation of what that final scene is. But Meg and Chris, what do you think that scene is? Like, what does that scene mean to you?
I think it's just him, going off into the sunset and having accomplished his mission and feeling like her spirit is there with him, approving of what he did, and he's. I'm sure there's there's many different interpretations for it, so I'm curious what you guys think. I think it's relatively straightforward for me.
I think at that moment he leaves the real world and enters a different realm where she's still alive, because they pan up and they show like a crazy fantasy landscape with multiple planets in the sky. And so I think at that moment he gives up on reality and he's like, I am just going to go in a world where Mandy's not dead and all this meant something. And you know what I mean? Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, I think my take is kind of right there in between yours. It's this mix of like the world is still real, but he is now choosing to leave it behind. Like he took his reason for living is gone. His friend Carruthers says that him going to take these folks on is a death sentence. And in actuality, Carruthers was probably right. Like, we don't see Red Miller die, but we see Red Miller leave this the real world is there and he's choosing to leave it. That last scene is, like so many other little elements in the movie, just this like love story to that 80s culture of like, heavy metal and comic books and, drawing like fantasy landscapes in your notebook and, wearing metal t-shirts. Like it's a love letter to that exact kind of thing. And,
this movie,
it's all, I see the whole movie within the context of that quote at the very beginning,
Yeah.
This movie and Disney's Onward are pretty much the same story, just same aesthetic.
Slightly different music.
Just the Vans.
Chris and I turned off Onward in the middle, so
we didn't make it.
We couldn't make it.
Wow.
I'm curious. All right, before what'd you say?
That's tough.
It wasn't very good. I know this is not what other people have said, but I did not think it was an interesting movie. Controversial statements. Sorry, guys.
Hey, I'm not mad at it.
If you don't want to listen to this podcast anymore, then I understand.
Mhm.
Just a question before we go on to the next section of this. So as someone who has seen it before, John, how did it hold up versus how you remembered it? I know it obviously wasn't very long ago, but did you like it more or less, or?
So, because I watched it, to reacquaint myself, so I could talk to the both of you about it, I watched with a bit more of a critical eye, but it definitely didn't feel like homework. That's for sure. Uh, I think I paid a lot more attention to how the plot had very few moving parts and all held together. I think I respected the dialogue a lot more. Like I really paid more attention to the exchanges between like everything the cultists said. That because like the delivery, like Jeremiah Sand's delivery is all over the place, and all the other cultists are almost cartoons at times. But like I really listened to their dialogue this time, and it was good. Like it was a good script. So that's what the second time around, it was I saw a good script, and I saw really interesting cinematography and practical effects, and I think I was just watching the spectacle of it all the first time. This time I knew what was coming, so I was able to focus on all the individual pieces of food on the plate, and I found them all delicious.
I will say that for my part, I think I enjoyed it even more this time. I remembered it different. I remembered it being more dark and disturbing and less enjoyable. But I thought the love story in the beginning was more, it really hit me harder now. I don't know. I found it very moving. I don't know. I liked it more this time, even though I did enjoy it the first time. And that's my thought on that. Chris,
Yes.
take us to the trivia section, please.
Oh, we're going to trivia. I thought we were going to trivia, but you know what happened? I forgot to hit. Oh boy. Oh, I'm messing up big time. Sorry, guys.
All right, so imagine if you will, the word trivia coming up onto the screen and spinning around with some
Trivia.
Remember we had the same problem last time too? It was like trivia button. The trivia button was.
All right. Well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna just go ahead and tell you guys some trivia that I found out about this movie. So when he was filming this movie, Nick Cage recently had a sudden end to his 14-year marriage to a woman named Alice Kim.
Trivia.
Thank you. So he got divorced very suddenly, and all of his feelings went into this performance. So he was acting from a place of loss already. Let's see, other trivia that I haven't already mentioned. That might be one of the best. Oh yes, here's a good one. Nicolas Cage had a screaming coach for this movie, which. Okay, is wild to me because if anyone doesn't need a screaming coach,
my hope is that the screaming coach was just trying to protect his instrument. Like those screams were Nick Cage being Nick Cage, but hopefully this person was just putting guardrails on it to not blow out his vocal cords or anything.
Yeah, it's probably more to do with like the protecting your actual voice kind of coach versus because he's not a singer, right?
No, I don't think so.
I wonder if he's had voice lessons in his life or something like that.
Another thing I forgot to mention is this movie is produced by Elijah Wood.
If you need another reason to like indie darling Elijah Wood.
And then the last one, how many people do you think were killed in this movie without counting? Just a high level.
I'm going to say 9.
Yeah, I would say 9.
It's 10. You guys are pretty close.
All right, cool.
All right, let's go on to the most important section of this where we rank the movie. So, Chris will hit a button and we will go to the...
we will go to the Rank the King. See, that one worked.
Nice.
That's nice.
Cool, huh? All right. And hopefully,
right.
it worked flawlessly, everyone.
Uh,
Except for says Nicolas Cage from our PNI, our last misspelling of Nicolas Cage.
So the way this works is that we rank the movie in a couple different categories out of 10. The magical spreadsheet sums up our points and ranks it against the 5 other movies that we've already ranked. Our top movie so far, John, for your information, is Face Off. So I do think this was a very favorable. Everyone really liked this movie. I'd be curious if it beats Face Off. We'll see.
I'm trying to think of how I want to approach it, because there's like how I would rank any other movie versus how I would rank Nick Cage movies. You know, like Face Off is for me like the absolute, like Face Off is the most Nick Cage movie in my mind, which that makes sense to me. But this is very Nick Cagey as well. So
we'll see where we end up. So the first category is cast, and so that's sort of as a whole, how strong was the cast? Not specifically their acting. This one's a little tricky. It's sort of like how much you were just like, oh, this guy's in this movie, this rules, you know?
Like when you walk into a movie, a Nick Cage movie, and you look around the cast, you're like, man, this is a really solid cast of great actors, like people you know, versus like it's Nick Cage and then like, you know, a bunch of people you have no clue who they are.
So but this one is tricky though, because I feel like this is a Nick Cage and a bunch of people I don't know who they are, but
it's a strong
I actually
cast,
really liked how well they were cast. So
right.
We'll leave it up to you to decide out of 10 what you would rank this. We'll start with you, John.
So and I don't want to talk through all of these as much as I'm going to talk about cast, because I think cast is the one that I kind of need to explain myself for.
Yes.
Nick Cage is Red Miller. Bill Duke as Carruthers, Linus Roach as the cult leader. I think all 3 of those casting choices were nearly perfect. You know, I think for Andrea Riseborough played Mandy Bloom, and then everybody else, you know, I mean, aside from Richard Brake, everybody else you probably haven't heard of, but I think everyone was like perfectly cast to do what they did. So given all of that, I'd be hard pressed to give it anything less than a 9.
Nice.
And Brendan on the chat agreeing either Andrea Riseborough. It says Andrea Riseborough is a god tier actor.
She's in a ton of stuff, and she's good in everything.
Okay.
I think Chris, did you just give a bunch of subscriptions to people at the chat?
Yeah. I just made it rain subscriptions for people because thank you for watching.
That's awesome.
Now you can use the emote Chris, of the donut.
Chris, what would you rank this?
Oh, all right. So I'm not gonna go as high as a 9. Usually how I play this is, do I walk in there and I'm like, boom, actor I know, boom, actor I know. It's not always the best way to, like, sometimes if all the acting's terrible and the casting decisions are wrong, I'm like, oh, this is terrible, right? But like you think like great ensemble cast in a Nick Cage movie, it's like I don't know. The first one's coming to mind is probably not the best one is Con Air, because it's like you got Steve Buscemi, you got a lot of like big time actors there. I'm not gonna like lowball this one because they're not all big actors. I agree with you. Everybody was a really great choice, so I'm gonna give it a 7.
I'm also gonna give it a 7. That was pretty much my logic too. I think everyone's on. All right. Acting, how good, not specifically Nick Cage, but just in general, how good was the acting in this movie?
So I feel like this is a tough script to act brilliantly in if you're not the lead. Like everyone here is just related to the lead and there to serve the lead, except for the cult leader. But the thing is, yeah, I mean, I think the cult leader acted well. I felt better about his acting. I'm going to say 8. 7. 7. But a solid 7.
Solid 7. I'm right there with you on the 7. Because, there wasn't a lot of meat for everyone to really, get into. But what they did have, they did good.
Yeah. I'll stick with the 7. It feels right to me.
Wow, the first time ever we're all in agreement on one category. That's cool. Fun.
All right,
Oh,
this
fun.
next category is how fun is this movie? I will say Face Off was a perfect 10 for me, for example, because I could not think of anything more fun than watching Face Off. I think, leaving Las Vegas was probably a 0 because it was incredibly unpleasant
Yes.
to watch.
Yeah.
So that's
You don't show up for Leaving Las Vegas to have a good time.
no.
For me, this is my Face Off. I'll put it to you this way: I probably had as much fun watching Mandy as I did watching Face Off, but Mandy did not have a completely unnecessary boat chase in it. So I'm going to give this one a solid 10 for packing in tremendous fun into a nice, tidy 2 hours. I got to watch it in freaking Salem with like my best friend. It was, yeah. And I got to watch it again under a heated blanket, like during Halloween season. So yeah.
Mandy is quickly
good 10
climbing
for
up the
me.
ranks. This is a high scoring film. I am not disagreeing with John here. It was really fun when that second act turn comes around and he starts forging his own axe. But I will say, just because like the first, I'm gonna give it an 8. It was super fun, but like I feel like when you think of Face Off, the whole movie's just fun and stupid. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I'm
that
gonna
is
go with an
fair.
8 on this one.
Yeah, I promise I don't always just say what Chris says. I was thinking of doing an 8 too. And I do want to point out, I just think that Chris and I had a lot of build up to this movie. We knew that it was coming. I knew that, like, Chris is not big on very disturbing movies, and we were talking about, all right, we're not going to watch this one at night. Like, we watched this one at like 8:30 this morning.
Yeah.
Specifically for the purpose
first
of
thing.
like not fucking up Chris's sleep. So it's just nice. I'm happy that after all this buildup of me being worried about how well it would go over with Chris, that you're here in the costume from the guy with the movie saying it was really fun. So,
Yeah,
next
I
one
was
is- sorry, go
pleasantly
ahead.
surprised. Anyway, yes.
What'd you say, Chris?
I was
talked over you.
pleasantly surprised.
Good. Next one, technical. This is sort of your like anything you'd get a technical Oscar for, so costuming, special effects, all that.
I mean, the practical effects gave me the same kind of like wonder I felt watching horror as a teenager. I thought the practical effects were great. I keep talking about the costuming, the music. I mean, I'm going to take a full point off for the fact that that's not how you make an axe. So it would have, so 9 minus 1 is an 8.
8. I really enjoyed all the cinematography. Not that I'm a connoisseur or know much about it, but I just really enjoyed how the film looked. And I mean, like, yeah, there was a lot of great practical effects. And but I wouldn't say I'm like, oh, this is as good as some of the other movies he's done. But I would say, just on the budget they had, I would probably put an 8 too.
I know this is gonna be crazy, but I'm gonna give this a 10.
Nice.
Wow.
I feel like the combination of the lighting and the way that it's shot and the music, it really stuck with me in terms of a mood, and I just thought it was so effective especially given the budget. So
this film is dangerously close to being number 1 in unseating Face Off.
Ooh.
I think it might unseat Face Off.
Wow. This is incredible. I
which
did not
we
expect that out of this
did
film.
not see that coming. So overall, this
Jesus.
is exactly what it sounds like. Out of 10, what overall is your rating for this movie?
I mean, I'm normally a pretty tough grader, but I look at this and this is a movie that's greater than the sum of its parts. It was disturbing at times. The effects were super interesting. I can't call it 10 overall. Not as a guest. It's like I'm like walking into someone else's house and stomping around with.
You can say whatever you want. If that's your real feeling.
This movie's a 10. I loved it.
Wow.
I loved it, and I loved it more the second time. I thought it was great. I want to watch it again at some point.
Damn. All right, I'm gonna say it's a solid 7 for me. It's not an 8. I'm bordering on 8, but it's I think I think there's other strong. If I'm comparing it to all the movies I've seen in Nick Cage's so far, I can't throw it up there with the other ones. Just based on. But also, I need to kind of bring down your guys because you're from.
Yeah, I'm going nuts. I saw overall, I lost my mind.
No, it's good. It's good. Meg.
Yes. I'm gonna give it an 8. I enjoyed it quite a bit. It's not my favorite movie of all time, but I think it's thoroughly good. So this last one in bonus, you can add or take away a single bonus point. And looking at some previous scores, we have a couple movies that are within 1 point of each other. So this really does matter. So like, for example, I've taken away a bonus point in the past for a bad hairpiece, or you can add a bonus point for some particular scene you like, or take away a bonus point for improper axe manufacturing technique. So
okay, so I already dinged him in technical for the axe. I stand by my 10 overall, but when you're looking at something that you gave a 10 to, I'm looking at it to say, okay, well, what didn't I like about a movie that's a 10? The scene with the chemist. I'm taking away 1 point because I don't think it was necessary. I think it dragged. It was the worst scene in the whole movie. And we didn't need it. So I would like to take away 1 point from this otherwise top-notch experience.
All right, 1 point. Sorry, I'm responding to somebody in the chat asking if have we done Bad Lieutenant yet, and no, not yet, but that is coming up. That's going to be a great episode.
That's a very frequently requested one.
Yeah.
So we got -1 for John for the bonus, Chris.
All right.
Anything you want to add or take away?
1 point for Knife Dick.
Nice.
Okay.
There it is.
I'm gonna add a point for the unnecessary tiger. I thought it was cool.
The tiger scene was great.
Love a tiger. I just want to, before we go to the score, I just want to point out that I have been keeping track of the guests' top-rated movies. So the guests that we've had who gave their movie the highest score. I believe this previously was tied between Dan Chapman for Face Off, and Brendan Buzard for Wild at Heart, who both gave 41 total points to their movie. You have hit 44, making you our most enthusiastic guest.
He's the most enthusiastic guest. I'll put some dubs. Yeah.
I like what I like. I like what I like.
Oh, I need to have some more things on my keyboard for celebration.
So let's see where this ranks against Face Off and our other movies.
Here we go. Oh, it's hidden. It's hidden. Mandy took the first place spot. What's behind me is the Wicker Man movie.
Oh yeah, we should change the layout so we can see number
Just
6 now.
Shrink that font a little or something. But wow, the Wicker Man is down deservedly in the last place, and Mandy and Face Off.
So
at the top.
I'll read these if someone's just listening on the podcast. Mandy is our number 1, Face Off our number 2, Wild at Heart number 3, Leaving Las Vegas number 4, National Treasure 5, and The Wicker Man is 6.
Wow.
I'm not mad at this.
I'm surprised. Really, this is a big turn for you, Chris. I'm happy it went this way.
Yeah.
So what I think is super cool is that Face Off it's either Face Off or Con Air that's really like the most like Nick Cage, like action hero Nick Cage movie. So I'm glad Face Off is up there. But Mandy represents what Nick Cage is capable of right now.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it's nice to see like peak Cage and crafty veteran Cage, both in these top spots.
It's nice to see he's getting better with time, like a fine wine.
Hey.
I would love to see, instead of I think I'm going to make this, instead of just a ranked list, a more like a scale where you see where they're clustered point wise. Like they're probably pretty close, Mandy and Face Off and Wild at Heart point wise, but we have them ranked. They might be off by like a few points, but it'd be interesting to see like which ones are real stinkers versus which ones are.
Agree.
You know what I mean? Like Wicker Man, I think had 60 points versus 122 on Mandy.
So we have the next section. This is
yes.
Chris's
The cage
baby.
gauge. Okay,
The
so
cage gauge.
the cage gauge is a quadrant graph that just maps that quintessential trademark Cage craziness versus his acting ability in this movie. So Jess Cage, you know what I'm talking about, that like that Cage craziness. And then, you know, so out of 10, what would you give him for his Cage craziness level in this film?
Oh, man, I hate to be like the enthusiastic guest, but like he drank a bottle of vodka in a bathroom while screaming and then forged an axe and then spent the rest of the time on drugs. 10.
I mean, you're not wrong. That is like really crazy. I hesitate to give it a 10 just because I like to differentiate between acting as the role requires and then that extra Cage crazy that he throws on things. And like, to me, a scene where he's screaming and he's in pain and it's like, oh my God, my wife died, is less of the Cage craziness versus the scene where he's there's a moment where it's some of his screens where he's like, hey, he does like that thing at the end. Those are a little Cage crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not gonna give it top Cage. It is a crazy movie, but like the smile at the end when he's doing all the teeth, like that's like what I call Cage.
Yeah, I gotcha. Like,
so I'm gonna give it an 8.
The smile at the end is like him dressed as the priest in Face Off.
Yeah.
Like that's I see what you're getting at. Yeah.
So I'm gonna give it an 8, but it is crazy. I mean, it is up there in terms of crazy.
Yeah, we don't have any of the sort of trademark Cage like talking, and then like one word in the sentence is just shouted for no reason. Yeah, I'm gonna say an 8 as well, because he does spend the first half of the movie relatively subdued, and it does seem like his craziness comes from circumstance and less of like he's just like, I've taken this character that should otherwise be normal and have made him insane.
Yeah. That's a good. Okay, all right. You know what? Now that within this context, could I amend mine down to?
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah, I think okay. I'll give it a 9 because yeah, I agree. Like I think he played the first half more or less as written, with potentially the exception of mentioning Galactus.
Yeah.
So yeah, okay, I'm good.
But he does. I should explain that more. It's like it's more like where Nick Cage takes the script and does something with it that is just purely Cage, and like he's doing it on purpose, and you know he is. So the acting ability in this movie, where would you rate him out of 10 on acting in this film?
So, you know, like I mentioned before, like this script doesn't give, you know, there isn't a ton of meat in it for anyone really to kind of flex their acting chops too much. I think he did what he did with the words on the page. I'm gonna go 7 here.
7. All right. You know, I'm actually gonna go higher than you on this one. I think he sold it. He was selling me. I you know, when he was emotional, I wasn't like, well, this is like all terrible acting. I thought it was great. He sold me.
No, that's fair. That's very fair.
I'm gonna give him an 8. How about you, Meg?
I'll give him a 7. I'm, you know, same boat as you guys, I think.
So interestingly, sorry.
Go ahead.
This lands us in the quadrant where we usually land with these films, which is on the crazier side and on the better acting side. And that puts us firmly in the center of this quadrant here. Now, if we look at it compared to the other ones, that's clustering with a lot of other movies. You got Leaving Las Vegas. You got Face Off. You've got this is oh God, the one with Elvis. What's the name of that one?
Wild at Heart.
Wild at Heart. And then this is Leaving Las Vegas. So you got those up in this quadrant. In the bad acting more crazy, we got Wicker Man.
Yeah.
And the less crazy bad acting, we've got National Treasure.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
All of those are in the precise correct spots.
Thank you.
I mean, it's good that we have 3 people voting because it averages it out nicely.
Yeah, that's nice.
I want to see what's going to be the first one to show up in the less crazy good acting category. We'll see about that.
Yeah. I may not be very many. Okay. We are now going to take a brief detour and hit a Nick Cage fact.
Oh, we are, aren't we?
Nick Cage facts. Nick Cage facts. So basically, this is the section of our podcast where we briefly learn about the man behind the movies. There's so many weird Nick Cage facts out there, many to go. I'm just gonna read a little story from an interview from him about him gambling. So this is what he said. He says, "The last time I gambled was 30 years ago. I was in the Bahamas and I walked into a casino and felt like I had my mojo with me, like nothing could go wrong. My game was roulette. I went in with $200. I didn't miss a number, so much so that even the lady spinning the wheel said, 'Nothing sweeter than a repeater.' In 20 minutes, I turned $200 into $20,000. So I went and I found an orphanage in the Bahamas, met all the kids and the headmistress and said, 'This is for you.' I put the 20 grand in her hand, walked away, and never gambled again because if I did, it would ruin the power of that moment."
Wow.
That's just a.
I can't.
Who knows
believe
if this is true?
I want to believe it is.
I want
I
to
do
believe
too.
it's
I want
true.
I want to believe the world is really like that.
Yeah, I'm voting with my heart and not my head, and saying
Yep.
I accept that as canon fact.
It's real. It's real.
All right. So, John, where can the people find you on mostly the internet these days? I would imagine. What would you like to promote?
Sure. So there is one show on the internet that is near and dear to, I think, two of the three of us here in this, and that's
Oh yeah.
Quarantine Action Wrestling. It is a completely fictional wrestling league that feels like 1990s WWE. Big characters, big promos, songs, music, fake commercials, and then all the matches are simulated in a video game. And it's every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, 5 p.m. Pacific, on twitch.tv/2MB Studios, the number 2MB Studios. And also on that, on Saturdays at 8 o'clock Eastern Time, I'm the game master of a show called Knights of Prospect, which is half live play role-playing game and half like comedy improv fantasy show. And that it's serialized. The episodes are about 70 minutes. They're super fun.
That's awesome.
I just
I
threw
gotta
that
check
in the
that show
chat
out.
for everybody's reference.
Yeah, check the chat for links to this. So other stuff that we usually promote on here, we have a virtual improv is our short form improv show that Chris and I and a few other people do every Friday night at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern. It's on this channel, so twitch.tv/managerscomedy. We will have another show this week. This is a special thing we're promoting this week only. So if you are listening to this live or before or on Tuesday before Wednesday, there's a online film showing for a short film that Chris and I and our friend Will Gianetta made called Me, You, and Marlon. It's part of the 48-hour film project. We basically, there's like an audience award for each individual screening, and we moved on to the audience award in our screening. So all of the other films that won audience awards are all going to be screening.
It's a really fun use of an evening. For it's I think it's $12 to watch, and
15 for this one.
15 for this one, and it's I think it's 12 films or 15, it's somewhere around that, and they're all about, the max time limit is 8 minutes. Everyone had a weekend to make that, but what this screening is all the ones that won the best in their filming group. So it's the audience voted.
20
It's 20 films.
Sorry.
The audience voted, and these are the ones they like the best. So if you're looking for something to do on Wednesday night, this is actually a really fun thing to do. I've seen them all because I watched most of the screening groups, and there are a lot of really good ones out there. So
And also, if you're friends with us in real life, send me a message and we'll have a Zoom screening party. We can all send messages to each other while we watch. So it's fun. And our next episode, which we are, wait, hold on, Chris, we always forget to do this. You ready? We have an email address.
Yeah.
So
if you have any suggestions or you have any questions or anything that we missed during the show or opinions that you want to share or anything like that, send an email to managerscomedy@gmail.com, and we can do some mail on the air.
Fan mail.
Fan mail or whatever the hell you
Can
want.
imagine?
Yeah.
Someday, Chris, we'll have fan mail.
Someday there'll be an email that comes about this, but we'll see.
Our next show is next Sunday, November 8th. We have our first double episode, which means we have two people, because this movie is so big, it couldn't just be one person. The movie is The Rock. We are doing The Rock, the second of the great Nick Cage 90s action trilogy that we are doing on this show. Our guests are Liz Jakowski and Connor Allen. two people you know from Boston. Very excited for this.
Welcome
about
to The
to say?
Rock. And right after the death of Sean Connery. So
Yeah,
Fine.
that was a total coincidence.
that was on purpose.
If I was to pick a 4-person dream team to talk about the movie The Rock, it would be these exact 4 people.
That's awesome.
I would pick Sean Connery, Nick Cage,
Fair.
And then another Nick Cage.
Jerry Bruckheimer.
And then Jerry Bruckheimer.
And we're always fundraising for the Downtown Women's Center organization in Los Angeles that serves a homeless community, and specifically women. It's a great organization if you feel like throwing a few dollars their way. Oh my gosh, this
The
has been a
link
great
is in
show,
the credits.
guys. What?
Sorry,
It's in the credits. Yeah, link
Yes,
is in
all
the
right.
credits.
Okay.
downtownwomencenter.org/donate. This has been a great show, guys. We finally got one under 2 hours. We're working on our timing, but it's just we just have so much fun. We just keep talking. It's
John,
great.
you're an awesome guest. Thank you so much
Yes,
for
thank
doing
you
the
so
show.
much. Very
There is
thoughtful.
nothing I would have rather done on a Sunday evening than talk with you two about this movie. Thank you both so much for having me.
Yes.
All right,
We'll
everybody.
See you all next week.
Have a good one.
Bye.